You're listening to Beat Autoimmune and Thrive, the podcast all about reversing and preventing autoimmune conditions so you can live your most vibrant life as soon as possible. We talk about autoimmune root causes, actionable solutions, and inspirational healing stories. I'm Palmer Kippola, and I used to have MS. Today, I'm an author, a speaker, a functional medicine certified health coach, a pickleball player, and nature lover who's helped thousands of people reclaim their health and their best lives. Let's dive into this episode. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Dr. Fred Luskin, one of the world's foremost researchers and teachers on the subject of forgiveness. Fred is the founder and director of the Stanford University Forgiveness Projects and longtime lecturer at the Stanford University School of Medicine. He is the bestselling author of Forgive for Good, Forgive for Love, and Stress-Free for Good, books that have helped thousands of people let go of resentment and lead healthier, happier lives. And his newest book, the Forgive for Good Recovery Workbook, Overcome Addiction, Heal Your Past, and Find Peace in Sobriety, just came out last month. Fred has spent decades studying the profound connection between forgiveness and physical and emotional well-being. His research shows that learning to forgive can reduce chronic stress, anger, depression, and even physical pain while increasing hope, resilience, and inner peace. And that's exactly why I wanted to bring him on this podcast. If you are navigating an autoimmune disorder or any chronic condition, you already likely know that emotional stress can be a major root cause or trigger. So this unprocessed pain, unresolved resentment, and long-held grief can keep the body stuck in fight-flight, which can make healing harder. And on a personal note, I had the privilege of taking Fred's wonderful Forgive for Good workshop through Stanford Healthcare, and that's open to the public. And I can say firsthand, his approach is not only wise and compassionate, but deeply transformative. And today, Fred is joining us to talk about why forgiveness is not just an emotional release, but a true deep healing practice for a good life, and how we can all learn to become more forgiving, more peaceful, and more free. And I say it's not a moment too soon. Welcome, Fred.
Thank you. You know, when you were saying before all the unresolved stuff and how it leads to stress, that's one aspect of it. But what's often missing is when you can't heal your emotional wounds or your resentments, you wander around with a sense of failure. And that's harder for people to admit. Stress is one thing, but we all know when we can't cope with life. And unforgiveness is a sign of I can't cope with life. Like I can't metabolize what happened to me and let it go. So that inability to master my own existence lowers a sense of efficacy, but increases fear.
Mm.
Because we all are anxious that it may happen again. And that's what the armor and the defensiveness and the bitterness, they're designed to try to protect us so it doesn't happen again. So what I'm highlighting is it's not just perseverating over the past, it's the unskillful protectiveness about the future that makes unforgiveness so physically diminishing.
Thank you for that. As you were just speaking about it, I felt like it's keeping us trapped in this cycle, this vicious cycle. When I don't feel efficacy, when I have no agency, when I feel a victim of my past and my circumstances,
Exactly.
I'm stuck, and that's
And we all
painful.
get stuck. I mean,
Yes.
it's it's like normative.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is why it's so important that you're here. And I always love starting with story. And I know you have several that we can talk about. And I'm curious what led you to this work originally. Was there some personal story or defining moment that made forgiveness such a central part of your life and your research?
I'll give you two. One is ever since I was a hippie young adult, I've been interested in spiritual questions. So I started meditating like in college, became a vegetarian in college. Just like what are we doing here and why? And there's got to be something better out there besides just hustling after more money and like seeing how powerful we can be. So I've had spiritual concerns and spiritual issues. When I was at my doctorate, I wanted to do some research on the relationship between a spiritual quality, secularizing it, and showing that it worked. Like trying to blur that distinction between religion and science. So
Mm.
that was one of the streams. The second stream that made me well known, not necessarily about my life, was when we finished my dissertation study, we applied for a grant and got one of the major grants, literally the only granting ever in forgiveness. Well, we were given a grant to expand my dissertation, and the Stanford report, because it was so unusual, like did a story on forgiveness study looking for volunteers.
Mm.
When that was released, they faxed it all over the place because it was novel. And it was the same day that Bill Clinton's semen was found on Monica Lewinsky's dress back 25 years ago. And the news media started calling me from that moment, should Hillary forgive Bill?
Mm.
So I became a well-known forgiveness spokesperson before I knew anything. Literally, I had this one little study, and we were preparing another study, and I'm getting calls from the New York Times and all this stuff. Um, that story is probably why we're talking, and I have a book, not necessarily my work, but that fortuitous whatever.
A moment in time. That is fascinating. I did not know that, and so wonderful. Now you're catapulted into who you are. And so before we dive into that and all of the wonderful stories you have, I wonder if you can take a moment just to set our expectations on what is forgiveness? What is it and what is it not?
I mean, nobody fully knows actually what any of these positive, heartfelt qualities are. We can approximate them.
Yeah.
For our research purposes, forgiveness is making peace with the word no. So it's no, you can't get the health you want. No, you can't get the husband you want. No, you can't get the weather you want. No, you can't get the traffic you want. No, you can't get the honesty that you want. It's forgiveness means that while grief and reactivity are normal when no emerges, if it doesn't get resolved and you keep on throwing a hissy fit around life that gave you a no, forgiveness is the unraveling of that hissy fit. And so it's making peace with the word no, with no. Your husband didn't come home sober today. No, he did not honor his marriage vows. No, your mother didn't parent you the way you hoped. Forgiveness is making peace with the no's that are real and underneath one's life, and how much energy we spend arguing with that no and having a hissy fit around it. It's so core to human experience the difficulty of dealing with life when it didn't unfold as you hoped.
Oh my goodness. I am marinating in that definition, and it sounds I I I love it so much. It's about our expectations. We think the world should be here, and it delivers here, or something just
Always.
slightly askew, something that, off. It's that suffering gap, right?
Yeah, and that distinction, peace and acceptance are bringing those into alignment.
Oh,
Unforgiveness is keeping them apart and shouting at life, you came out wrong, which is a losing bet long term.
yeah.
Short term, it's quite healthy to shout at life. Long term, it's hugely destructive.
Thank you for framing it that way. I wanna go to an extreme when it comes to forgiveness, and that takes us to some of the projects that you did at your during your work at Stanford, which is research with people who have suffered unimaginable trauma, including mothers from war-torn countries who have lost children. And so we think about ourselves in our daily lives and, I didn't get whatever I wanted in childhood, taken to an extreme of being a mother who loses a child to murder. And you found that forgiveness is possible, even in those circumstances. Can you talk a bit about that work?
I mean, I didn't find anything new. I mean, because people, unfortunately, have had to forgive real difficulties throughout human history. One of the bets that human beings make is if they don't notice other people's suffering and don't care, maybe less of it will come to them. Like they try to harden their hearts. I'll just live safely in my comfort and everybody else can take care of themselves.
Mm.
It's a strategy that makes them deeply unprepared for life
Yeah.
because you're not cultivating resilience and you're not cultivating empathy, you're cultivating protection. So we have dealt with people who have had family members murdered, or we dealt with people who have done murders in violent situation. But that's probably the most trivial aspect of forgiveness because it's rare.
Yeah.
The most important parts of forgiveness really are working with the people you care for.
Mm.
So you don't let your partner's flaws blow up your relationship. And you don't let the normal vicissitudes of life bend you out of shape so you miss the beauty in life. That's the core power of forgiveness. It's like you want to be a forgiving person, not necessarily the 1 out of 10 people, I mean, the strategy I just said to you, when I was more naive about humanity, I remember talking to some woman who was telling me that, like, her dad had just died at 99 or something, and she was shocked. And I remember thinking to myself, you were shocked that a 99-year-old person died? Like, what planet do you live on? But I have seen that now throughout so much, is that people are shocked when life happens to them. Shocked. Because they're not paying any attention to what life actually is. And so they're unprepared. In terms of marriage, the Gottmans, the famous researchers, they have come to over their years of whatever, saying, if you really want to prepare for a decent long-term relationship, ask yourself, can I deal with the crap my partner brings? Not do they have their good qualities. Everybody has good qualities, and the good qualities everybody can deal with. But you want to ask yourself, is the garbage that comes with my partner, am I willing to take that on? That's the crucial question. And what that's saying is pay attention, open your eyes, see life. Don't punish your partner because they show up as human, because you thought they were perfect or they were this, and you being so wonderful that only a perfect person would find you. But this is a life of yin and yang, up and down, and understand that you're going to get both. That's how you prepare to be forgiving,
Mm.
is not to go like this to suffering and not to make believe that you're special and nothing bad will ever happen to you. Those make us so harshly reactive when life unfolds.
Yeah. I love how you are framing this around everyday life and not some extremely rare situation where it's like, you know, a murder of a child or some horrific
Exactly.
trespass. Um, and I also really appreciate the physical and emotional consequences to what happens when people hold on to this resentment and pain.
Yeah.
We can become addicted to it. We feel somehow or other vindicated because we feel morally superior. We are
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And holding on to that air of moral superiority and not accepting another person's flaws. This is what you're saying. This is where we get I'm seeing again this difference of like, I have an expectation here and you are not meeting my expectation. So somehow or
Exactly.
other, it's
Exactly.
not about this person needing to fix themselves and come up and meet me. It's about me softening my expectations, perhaps.
Softening and maturing and I mean, it's painful to recognize that this life involves difficulty and things to overcome, and and people who don't always treat us well, and mistakes that we will make. That's part of the pot. That's part of what being alive is. And a body that is vulnerable. I mean, the work that you're doing, we exist in vulnerable bodies.
Yes. Yes. And I do want to highlight a particular area that is so common, in particular among women who suffer from autoimmune disorders, and those are the adverse childhood experiences. The ACEs study profoundly showing the profound linkages between what happens in childhood, the emotional, physical, psychological abuse and neglect, and then the later development of autoimmunity, just the increasing the risk. So let's take an example of a woman who's experienced, severe abuse in childhood. Let's even call it sexual abuse by a family member. Okay. And I would love some specific guidance for this particular person who is really wanting to heal from this autoimmune disorder. How does she start to think about forgiveness in light of this painful experience? And by the way, more than 66% of people have been shown to have at least one of these adverse childhood experiences. And the more of the negative adverse experiences, the greater the increased risk. So this is a real deal.
So if what you're saying is true with that past statistic,
Yeah.
then you're saying people need to come to peace with a normal childhood.
Yeah. I'm saying people need to come to peace with, I'm
Well,
going to
if
use the
two,
word
if
normal in quotes.
but if 2/3 have that
Yeah.
experience, it's not unusual. So that's that part of what you're saying is, and I don't know that that statistic is accurate. It may be accurate in the world that you live in, clearly. But if it's even 30%,
Yeah.
then for whatever reason that I don't know and certainly don't want, overcoming harsh, difficult, and abusive parenting is not an unusual experience.
Right. Sad
So,
but true. Sad but
well,
true.
but that takes some of the victimhood away.
Yes. Yes.
And it becomes a question of, like, this may be an obstacle that many people have to full adult development, rather than just poor me, what a horrible experience, and it's their fault. It may be a uncomfortable, horrible, but necessary stage of growth for a significant percentage of human beings.
Yeah.
That takes away a good deal of the excessive garbage about what happened. And the other thing, then the question to ask is, today, right now, today, what am I doing to either free myself emotionally or cement myself in as a victim? Like, that becomes the essential question. Like, right now, what's the story I'm telling myself? Who has responsibility for my well-being, my terrible parents or me? What I'm thinking of, when did it happen? Is my mind in 1996 or is my mind in 2025? Those are all present-centered questions to pull back some of the power that we keep on giving to our past. That would be some of you asked me, what would be some strategies? The other strategy is to relax. Like, when you're upset, relax. Quiet, gentle, soften. When you don't like dad, relax.
Mm.
There's also that, and I'm not saying this is easy, but I've seen people do it with a lot of horrible things. There's that wonderful Course in Miracles question: would you rather be right or happy? And unfortunately, we have to ask ourselves that, because we may not get both. One of the things I learned teaching was it's really important to know right from wrong. So this is in no means saying beating the crap out of kids is okay, sexually molesting them is okay. Um, but it's also saying that once I know it's not okay, it does me no good to remind myself. So I used to tell people in my classes, put a little piece of paper somewhere. The way mom treated me was not okay. And read that, for 2 weeks. And then when it comes back up, you just have that piece of paper. Oh, it's not okay. Okay, fine. It doesn't need to occupy any more of my current space. I'm not making it okay. It can never be okay. But that's 10 years ago or 20 years ago. It doesn't have to have anything to do with who I am now.
I love that. I love how you give the distinction and you talk about taking up real estate in your brain. Our precious brains are so occupied by so much stuff. And by
In the past.
giving in the past,
Mm,
where we just were hoping for a different outcome of our past
that's right.
and it
That
didn't happen.
forgiveness is giving up all hope for a better past.
Yeah.
The other thing that one can do to be more forgiving is become more grateful. You can't do it without that. You simply, if you're going to see accurately that the cup is half empty, and what we learn teaching free, we never argue with anybody. I'm sure they know all the bad things about their past, and I'm sure they're true. It just doesn't matter in the way they think it matters. That's the thing. It's true. We would never try to tell somebody it's not as bad as you think, or they didn't mean it. They may have meant it, and it may be worse than you think. And the
And
world is still filled with love and goodness. And people use their wounds as like a solar eclipse.
mm, yeah, it really, really helps to put it in proper context. When I know that what happened to me, I'm not that unusual. I know this happens to a lot of people. What stories do I keep telling myself?
And
How can I find more
whose
freedom?
whose fault is it that I'm not free now?
Mm,
It's disempowering to blame the past or someone else if you've had time to grieve the injury. If you haven't had time to grieve the injury, that comes first.
yeah.
But
Well,
if
this
it
is
was 20 years ago, you've had time.
you've had time. So, in Forgive for Good, which I think is a fantastic, maybe first book to dig into your work, you offer 9 steps to forgiveness. I don't know that you need to take us through all 9, but I let's take that example of this woman. Let's call her Susie.
Mhm.
And she has now decided that she'd like to forgive, let's call her uncle, for what he did in childhood.
Okay.
Um, could you guide her through, like, how you would go about that?
I'm going to answer you in part that the workbook that we just released does that like inch by inch. Like
Fantastic.
it's simply a workbook that people use, and it takes them exactly through what you're asking. It
Perfect.
it it expands Forgive for Good into all sorts of prompts and meditations, and just from soup to nuts, like how you do it.
Perfect.
Some of what I just answered you was in part what I would suggest to that woman. But the first thing I would do would be to say, you're right here and now. You're not in whatever year you think happened, right here, right now. So we're going to look at what you're telling yourself and how your body is responding. And we're going to let go of whoever it is you thought was at fault. That that's their karma, so to speak. But it's just you let that go. And then we will work on who you are and how you want to create the next step in your life. And so we're going to take you from looking backwards to looking forwards.
Mm.
That would be the framing. What you want to end up with is a completely different story than the one that kept you stuck.
The step that you mentioned about letting go, that seems to me, personally, to be the toughest part.
What
And,
about it?
well, if forgiveness is so clearly so good for us, why is it so hard to do, and why are we holding on to this grudge? And maybe it's my need to be right, maybe it's my, uh, I'm just so attuned to this, quote, "grievance channel." Um, I might need a little more help letting go. So, you've mentioned a lot of things, and maybe this is just my own personal resistance to things, but I'm right here and now. What are we telling ourselves right now?
Well, the simplest is if it's 5, 10, 15, 20 years later, then you can sit right there and say, I fully and completely forgive X for whatever they did in the past. I fully and completely forgive X for whatever they did in the past right now.
Right now.
then you can remind yourself, like again, because forgiveness is giving up all hope for a better past, or no, that you can hum a little bit of the Rolling Stones. You can't
Can't
always
always
get
get what you
can't
want.
always get what you want. And that is a crucial existential reminder of life. And if you want to ignore that, then go ahead. Like, but you cause suffering. It's not your dad's fault if or your uncle's fault if you continue to say to yourself, I should have gotten the childhood that I wanted. That just you can do that till you die, and it causes suffering every time you do it.
Yeah. You call that an unenforceable rule, the should.
Yeah,
This
yeah,
should never have happened, or this should have happened.
yeah.
Well, the fact that it didn't.
Here's the one two there's two reasons your question is hard to answer about why, because it's multiplex. But one of them is it's so hard for us to accept our vulnerability.
Mm.
Who really wants to relax and open up to the fact that people hurt us and there was nothing we can do about it? Who wants that? But if when you do that, you recognize that that's true, and that can happen again in life, and it can happen. And so the choice we make is to armor up rather than opening. And that then becomes part of our life. If you accept your vulnerability a little more, then you allow in more goodness. Because if you're vulnerable, you can see, well, we're all vulnerable. And like I'm vulnerable also to realize how vulnerable I am to kindness. It's like if somebody does something nice to me, I want to be soft enough to recognize it. And that's what we cast out by reducing our vulnerability. It's like
Mm.
we cast that away. And then the piece of I really can't always get what I want. So why don't I focus a little more on what I did get what I want and see how that does with those scales? That's how you forgive.
This is reminding me of the power of compassion for ourselves as these vulnerable humans, but also for the quote perpetrator. I have found in my own life that when I understand someone better, I get to understand their own personal story. How did they become who they became?
Mhm.
That is a path for me, I have found, to open my own heart to someone when I can accept more fully they didn't know better. They were abused. They were doing the best they could. I'm not trying to excuse it away, but I have found that just having a little bit more compassion for the person gives me a deeper sense of understanding that might have contributed to some action. Is that
My my own experiences for people who are raw and struggling to forgive, it's probably better to start with compassion for themselves
Yeah.
as having suffered,
Yes.
that they can touch shared humanity as to their suffering and other people's suffering, and the part that suffering is a normal part of life, but they can go from a little bit self-pity to more kind-hearted compassion. It can be a big leap to go to compassion for people who were horrible to them.
Yeah, I understand.
It's I mean, it's possible, but I've seen a lot of people fail because they try to go to compassion for people that harmed them. And it's too big an ask.
Thank you for that. Yeah,
It's raw stuff.
it is. We start with ourselves.
Exactly. At least in that kind of situation.
I wonder if you have thoughts about forgiveness that you want to make sure that we cover. You have studied this for so long. You've seen the worst of the worst
Yeah.
and had
Yeah.
these incredible experiences of uh, how it's possible for the human heart to forgive these horrible incidences. And in your own life, experiences of forgiving on a day
Yeah,
to day.
of course.
So, what have I not asked you, or what would you like to share about forgiveness or unforgiveness?
When we were starting our project, myself and my mentor at Stanford, we wanted always to do a secular project, always. But we had two spiritual influences on us or that were part of it. And I find those important to also remember. So one of them was Jesus on the cross saying, "Forgive them, they know not what they do."
Mm.
And again, we're secular teachers entirely, but that summarizes what you said, that people, including us, behave terribly and don't know what we're doing. We make mistakes, we hurt people, we hurt ourselves. Sometimes we're just blind. The question is, are we going to forgive those blindnesses or are we going to hold on to them with bitterness? So that's one. The second was the Buddhist understanding of loving kindness, which is the practice of, I wish for you the good that I wish for me.
Mm.
That's loving kindness practice. And what we found was if we could seed those two ideas in a secular, completely non-denominational manner, that they helped people open their hearts a little bit more to forgive. That let me just recognize that we all hurt each other and that it's important for our hearts to open by forgiving, and we can start by wishing people well rather than not well as a practice. So those themes help you keep your heart open. And I'll stop with Stephen Levine, the deaf and dying teacher. He used to quote that, like, the difficult human task is to keep your heart open in hell.
Mm.
And there's some truth to that, in particular with the people that you're referring to. Like, they've been through a part of hell, and this is an invitation to try to open their heart back up.
I love it. And that ties into the ending of your book, Forgive for Good. You write that forgiveness is above all a choice.
Mhm.
It's a choice to find peace and live life fully. And we can either choose to remain stuck in the pain and frustration of the past or to move on to the potential of the future. It's a choice we can all make, and it's a choice that will lead to a healthy and happier life. So, do you have any thoughts at the end of this for what you most want listeners to walk away with today?
Well, I mean, when people ask me about my research, I say the really important news of our research was forgiveness is a teachable, learnable skill. It's not esoteric. It's not buried in religious doctrine. It's something you can pick up a book, teach yourself to do, and free yourself from real suffering.
The beautiful place to end. And I invite our listeners, if you're watching or listening to this, the new book that you have out is a workbook. and it will guide you through exactly the step-by-step on how to do this. Because I can imagine people thinking, I hear what you're saying, I just don't know how to do this. So again, the name of the book is The Forgive for Good Recovery Workbook, Overcome Addiction, Heal Your Past, and Find Peace in Sobriety, which came out just last month, and I will put that information.
And let me just be clear. The framing is for people in recovery. The method is completely the same. I mean, it's the same method.
That's right. That's right. So it takes your beautiful work and expands on it wherever you are and whatever you might need to forgive. And I love the step by step. I love having a big workbook to write things in. I think people will find that really, really practical. And I'm just so grateful that you are continuing to do this work and putting it in such an accessible format. And I'm so grateful to you for your wisdom, compassion, and for reminding us that forgiveness is not about condoning what happened. It's just about freeing ourselves from the grip of what happened and clearing that precious real estate in your brain and heart and body so that you can heal. So, to everyone who's listening, if you're holding on to pain, resentment, or a story that's weighing you down, this is your invitation to heal. You don't have to carry this with you forever. And if you're on a healing journey from autoimmunity or chronic illness or whatever, forgiveness is not a fluffy, nice to have concept. It is a powerful tool for calming your nervous system, for getting out of that chronic fight flight and creating the conditions for true healing. And I love that you say, Fred, that forgiveness above all is a choice to find peace, a choice to move forward, and a choice to heal. So I'm so grateful for you, and I just wish for all of you, until the next time, please be kind to yourself, and you get to tune into whichever channels you want. You can turn into the grievance channel, or you can turn into the channels of love, gratitude, and compassion, and above all, remember that healing is truly possible. So, Fred, I'm grateful for you, my friend, and thank you so much for your wisdom and your time and your compassion. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Until next time, my friend, be well.
And that's a wrap. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, share it with your friends and family, and if you feel inspired, please leave a quick review so other people can find it too. Now, if you want to beat autoimmune and thrive, make sure you sign up for my free video training at freeautoimmunetraining.com. That's freeautoimmunetraining.com, and watch the first video right away. Take good care. Bye for now.